Descent of the Demon God. By Hanjo Wiolia. Chapter 204. Larisha. Part 1. Void Realm. After a Chunyoan climbed to the realm beyond the natural realm, he reached the Void Realm. According to the Myriad Thought Scripture, one of the ancient books known as the Three Great Books of the Central Plains, together with the Xuanhua Xinjing, if one realizes the emptiness and residual meaning, one will shed the shell. The first step is also known as the realm of emptiness, the state of realizing the truth of the universe. The one who reaches this realm can use space swords and space moves, or you can simply eliminate specific spaces. Grand Duke Kaliaf and Duke Bevman didn't have the eyes that could tell them the number of the opponent's power. However, one can predict the opponent's level when one reaches their level. Strong. The first time they saw the subordinates of Night King, they seemed fine. These prisoners were full of confidence, moving with force, and the extraordinary power oozing out of their bodies was above Duke level. Slash. For Chunyoan, it was just one slash. As Chunyoan was walking ahead, he lightly drew his sword, and their throats were slashed without even being able to exercise their power. I feel it each time, but he's really a monster. That was what the two of them thought. Then what about the Night King who lost his men? The expression of the man who had infinite trust in his men went stiff. One slash? If he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, he would have never believed it. Pack. Something protruded from the chests of each demon who were cut down. They were the nuclei that moved into the hands of Chunyoan. After pulling it out, the heartbeat in the bodies of the demons got weaker. Nucleus? Night King frowned. The match was already done. He thought about that because this is one of the many secrets of the dungeon. Unlike the other parts of the prison, this was the place where no one could regenerate after getting injured. That was why the demons were fighting a life and death battle here. It was so that they would be stronger than the demons on the outside. What is he doing? For that reason, the Night King couldn't understand Chunyoan's actions. Whoa! At that moment, gloomy energy rose from Chunyoan's right wrist. The nuclei he held in both hands were wrapped inside a blue light. The light then seeped into Chunyoan, and the nuclei broke. PSSS. Chunyoan closed his eyes and trembled. The green eyes of Night King, who was carefully watching Chunyoan, fluttered more than before. Right now, he doubted his own eyes. Other demons didn't even notice it, but he knew. Ability absorption. The one-eyed demon standing next to him was puzzled by Night King's words. It was because he didn't know what it truly meant. Fat. At that moment, Night King moved ahead like the speed of lightning and went for Chunyoan. He tried to grab the neck of Chunyoan, who had been temporarily defenseless as he was absorbing the power of the nucleus. Who said you could? Grand Duke Kaliaf stopped Night King at high speed and kicked him. Pack. Night King lightly grabbed the Grand Duke's leg, aiming for him. Tremble. As Night King caught the kick, he felt his right hand tremble. His eyes lit up. He is a candidate for the Demon King title. Has he gotten used to the place already? The Grand Duke's powerful kick was extraordinary. Until recently, Grand Duke Kaliaf hadn't adapted to the conditions here. But in just a short time, he managed to use great strength. You still have a long way off. Whoa! A green light flashed from his right hand. Ominous energy emanated from the green light along with a weird stench. Night King threw it into a fist and launched ahead. This is bad. Grand Duke Kaliaf, who judged that this energy was dangerous, tried to move away but then stopped. Chunyoan was right behind him. Shit. The moment he would move, Chunyoan would get hit by this bizarre energy. The Grand Duke immediately changed his mind and concentrated on the demonic power in his body to withstand this attack. Bang! and the first attack was on his abdomen. The moment the green light touched the body, a scream erupted. Quack! Stupid bastard! Fighting me to protect the one behind. The secret of the green light was terrible poison. Night King had the ability to deal with poison even before he was imprisoned. Once he entered Bamut, he used poison gas and extracted it around the prison to get stronger than before. Shh. Quack. The Grand Duke's armor began to melt after it was hit, and the color of his abdomen turned black. Grand Duke Kaliaf didn't back down, despite the pain. Still, in the name of the former Demon King candidate, you must be working hard to not move, despite the poison in your stomach. The Night King praised him. For a being who had already been through numerous fights, he confirmed his power. Even Duke-level demons go beyond trembling. Their bodies shake with just a single hit of his fist, and then they will melt away. What amazing power! It was acknowledged that the demonic power in Kaliaf made him known to be a monster. What is making you protect him? Grand Duke Kaliaf was close to being a king. However, it didn't make sense to protect a simple human. Trembling, Grand Duke Kaliaf said, "He is the Grand Duke's master." At that, the Night King shouted, "Master? Huh? You mean that the Grand Duke Kaliaf has a human master? Is it because he has Larisha's sword?" Night King noticed the power of Chen Yuan. He was convinced that Chen Yuan had Larisha's sword from when he absorbed the nuclei. Grand Duke Kaliaf didn't answer. It was already taking him a lot of strength to control the poison seeping in. "You are still the same. Kook. Do you not know me?" Night King asked. However, Grand Duke Kaliaf had no idea what the other was saying. Green wrinkled face and glowing green eyes. None of the people he knew were like this. Disappointed, Night King said, "Enough. I was going to kill you anyway. Just die now." As if he didn't want to talk any further, Night King pulled out a fist full of poison. Night King's fist quickly aimed at Grand Duke's chest. It was then. Pang! Just as he was about to punch, his body bounced back more than 10 meters by some counter-repelling force. Papa Pack! Quack! Night King looked at the Grand Duke with bewildered eyes. Did he kick my fist? His fist still had poison on it, but he couldn't understand what had happened. The force which deflected him didn't come from Grand Duke Kaliaf. Chen Yuan placed his hand on the Grand Duke's back. "I see you got what I entrusted you to, Kaliaf." The Grand Duke tried to smile. Of course. Chen Yuan smiled bitterly. Actually, he didn't take long to absorb his new powers, but he wanted to watch how the Grand Duke would act. Whether or not he was suppressed by force, if his loyalty was true, or if it was only in the form of words. And he passed the test. The poison. I'll take it out. What? Whoa. Chen Yuan placed his hand on the back of the Grand Duke and breathed internal energy into the body. It was entirely different from demonic power, but it would avoid affecting the body if he handled it as if he was lightly inducing it. Papak. Chen Yuan lightly patted the Grand Duke's body, and the poison came out. Ack. The smoke even came out of Grand Duke Kaliaf's mouth. He released the poison? Grand Duke Kaliaf frowned at the ability of Chen Yuan. This wasn't some strong poison, but it was still his first time seeing someone detoxify the poison this way. Chen Yuan looked at Night King and said, "You must be the leader of this place." He could tell that just by looking at the attitudes of the other demons. Night King, who was glaring at Chen Yuan with his gleaming green eyes, said, "What are you? How can a human have that kind of power, and why do you have Larisha's sword?" Larisha's sword? Chen Yuan's eyes narrowed at the mention of Larisha. Even Grand Duke Kaliaf was the same. The only people who knew of Larisha as Larisha were the current demon king who disappeared and him. "Who are you?" At the question of Kaliaf, the Night King laughed bizarrely. "Ahahaha. You are interested now? So late. You should have immediately recognized me, the Duke, the moment you saw me, and apologized for not performing your duties as the servant." "Duke?" Grand Duke Kaliaf looked confused, and Night King slammed his hand to the floor. "Pack. Everyone. Die." At that moment, a stench and poison began to seep from the floor. Chen Yuan quickly waved his hand, and Kaliaf and Duke Bebman behind him were thrown off and flew back. "Huh." And the green light began to shine out from the floor. The light, which was poisonous, filled around a 50-meter radius reaching the ceiling. "Master." Grand Duke Kaliaf looked at the green pillars that were soaring high. If it had been a little later, they would have been engulfed. They escaped, thanks to Chen Yuan. Night King giggled. "Idiot. To sacrifice yourself to save those people. Grab." Someone grabbed his head from behind. "Don't tell me you thought you could avoid me with this trick?" Night King's green eyes trembled as he heard the voice from behind. In that brief moment of his attack, he didn't think the human would appear behind him by avoiding the poison. "If you know Larisha, you must know a lot." Chen Yuan gave strength into his hand, and the Night King said with a laugh. "You made a mistake. You put your hands on my body." Pock. As soon as he said that, a green light erupted from the Night King's head. It was poison. He could use poison from his entire body and even make a poison beam from his eyes. In a cheerful voice, he spoke. "Too late. It's already on your hand, and the poison must be on." Crack. Qual. Night King screamed as Chen Yuan's fingers dug into his skull. The pain was brief, but he was still giving out poison, so he couldn't understand how Chen Yuan could still do it. "Why you? Have you lost it? The poison will melt your Han. What do you expect me to do?" "What?" Night King couldn't understand what was happening. However, looking at the current situation and the expressions of the demons, a rough idea formed. "No way. Night King's poison isn't working." The green light wasn't entering Chen Yuan's body but was dispersing around. Poison was also a kind of energy, and it would be of no use if the opponent had energy surpassing his. "No. I was planning to have it as a trump card." Grunt. Night King clenched his teeth and endured the pain. He then tried to raise his hand to cover his face. However, chuck. Quack. Before he could raise his hand, it was swiftly cut off from the elbow. This. Night King was shocked at how he was stopped, before even doing anything. Chen Yuan spoke in a tired voice. "This is tiring." Then he lightly swung the sword, and the other arm of Night King was cut off. Chuck. Quack. Night King, who could no longer depend on his poison due to the pain of the arms being cut off, soon reduced the poison discharge. He only looked at his fallen arms. He knows about awakening? There was no other way to stop this man. Chen Yuan spoke in a voice full of ridicule. "Thinking you can change with this advanced awakening? Well, I wouldn't let you do that." Night King was shocked as it felt like Chen Yuan could read his thoughts. What is this man? Night King thought as he couldn't understand the situation he had never experienced before. It wasn't a matter of whether or not he succeeded in advanced awakening, but this man behind him could rip him off each chance. Chen Yuan asked while holding his head in his hand. "What do you know about Larisha?" At that, Night King's expression distorted. "You think I will just say something to you because you ask me repeatedly?" The Night King wasn't afraid of death. From the moment he came here, he thought he could die any moment. "Kill me if you want to." Instead, the demons under him were shocked at his expression. No one expected the one they worshipped as king to be so helpless. With a distressed expression on his face, Night King decided to risk his life. World has to be round. Larisha. The one who couldn't do anything for you. If this is what you are, then you must know. What? It was then. Pong. A tremendous wind pressure raged from behind. Night King, who was held captive, was thrown to the floor and rolled down as he didn't have arms to stop. Quack. As he could not balance, he barely managed to get himself up. And the moment he was up, his green eyes shook. No way. Night King wouldn't help but be shocked at what he was seeing. The incarnation of black flame appeared in front of him. The image of the one he always dreamed of. Larisha. Chapter 205. Larisha. Part 2. In the hidden underground complex in the Devil King's castle, Duke Edwy was looking at a glass tube. When he touched the tube with his hand, the light on an arrow sign shone and a voice rang out, decreasing the concentration of the regeneration interruption liquid. When the voice ended, the liquid in the tube gradually faded. Bubble. As the liquid went down, a change occurred in the tube. Originally, the person in the tube had no body parts except for his chest and head, but he suddenly took on the shape of a human. His body was forming as muscles grew and tightened. It seemed that regeneration was occurring. I lowered the concentration by just 5% and the rate of recovery is this quick. Duke Edwy's face darkened. Although he had already made up his mind, the regeneration speed terrified him nonetheless. Although nearly 2,000 years have passed, he still looks like a monster. It wouldn't be weird if normal clan members had turned to ash in that time. He thought if he were to stop Chen Yuan as soon as possible, the only hope for him was the being inside the glass tube. Ugh! The being in the glass, which had wires in it, shook. Too quick. Once the basic muscles took shape, the body began to move. It was only a matter of time until this being come to his senses. No, I need to finish this. Duke Edwy, who was about to proceed, suddenly changed his mind and hastily touched the tube, normalizing the concentration of regenerative interruption liquid. Whoa! With a resonating sound, the upper entrance of the glass tube split in half and opened. Duke Edwy slowly moved up to look down at the existence in the glass tube, which was fixed with wires around to restrict motion. Shoo! Duke Edwy touched the armor on the man's lower body. Cha-cha-cha-cha. The lower body armor disassembled and transformed into 12 daggers that floated in the air as if they were on defense. Shoo! Among the daggers, the one with the most splendid form had the shape of a crown and was on Duke Edwy's head. Phew! Duke Edwy stretched out his hand towards the inside of the tube and the rest of the daggers entered it. Thud! The daggers which went in seemed like they were swimming and soon began to pierce each part in the tube. Puck! They pierced the back of the man's head, middle of his spine, his shoulders, both of his elbows, and his knees and ankles. The handles seemed stuck, as if all 11 daggers were restraining him. Done. Duke Edwy sighed in relief. He was worried about whether the daggers would work. Tremble! Even though the daggers were used to restrain the man's movement, the glass tube shook. Even with just half of his muscles formed, the strength wasn't even close to the man's actual strength, but he was still strong. Are you rebelling? Duke Edwy put his hand on the crown on his head as a white light flowed from the daggers on the body of the being. Suddenly, the creature stopped moving. Done. Duke Edwy was joyous. Approaching the being carefully, he smiled that he had managed to control it as he mumbled. Does it hurt, Demon King? Shocking words came from his mouth. The identity of the being inside the weird liquid with just half of its face was none other than the Demon King, who hadn't appeared in public for 2,000 years. Chuck! Duke Edwy came down from the tube and looked at the Demon King, who was restrained by the daggers, and said, "You will finally be able to move according to the Duke who served you." Haha. The lower body armor that had transformed into 12 daggers was known as Larisha's dagger, and its ability was control. It perfectly restrained the opponent and allowed the user to control them. Ha 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 ha. Demon King. To be able to move the Demon King at will. Duke Edwy couldn't hide his joy at it. As long as he was able to control the strongest demon in the clan, everyone else would be useless. With the Demon King at his command, everything was possible. If the Demon King appeared publicly, not just Grand Duke Kaliaf but all the demons would no longer object to his command. It was the moment he dreamed of the most when thinking of a new future. The regeneration of the constraint is rapidly improving. The expression of Duke Edwy, who was delighted, soon went stiff. Something expected was happening right in front of him. The Demon King's body, which was once again filled in liquid, suddenly started to regenerate. Ta-tack. Duke Edwy touched something on the tube and tried to increase the regeneration interruption, but the speed didn't stop. Just what the hell? This was the moment when he stopped understanding what was happening. The dagger in the arm of the Demon King, who had been fixed with wires, began to move. Duke Edwy concentrated his energy onto the crown. Stop. Stop. A strong white light shone from the dagger, but the Demon King's arm continued to twitch. Break! The wire holding the arm broke and tear. Through the glass tube, the arm of the Demon King grabbed the neck of Duke Edwy, who was standing in front of him. Grab! Quack! Duke Edwy was the strongest of the aides, but the Demon King's hand moved so fast that even he couldn't react. Damn it! Duke Edwy raised his demonic power and tried to cut off the Demon King's arm, but a scream then erupted from the Duke. Quiet! Duke Edwy screamed, feeling his face shrink. No, it wasn't just his face. His entire body began to turn thin, as if the moisture in the body was being drained out, and his body kept turning smaller. PSSSH. Ack. At some point, Duke Edwy wasn't able to speak any longer. All that was left was the pieces of armor that he had been wearing, but they too scattered into ashes once his core was shattered. Crack! The wires that covered the Demon King's face and chest were cut, revealing silver blue hair and a cold face. The Demon King ripped off the wires on the rest of his body and broke out of the glass. However, the eyes of the Demon King were strange, as if filled with anger. Tremble! His body then emitted a tremendous amount of demonic power. Pang! The unimaginable power was strong enough to crush everything around him as it continued to grow. Crack! Thud! Break! The Demon King's castle collapsed in an instant due to the aftermath of his powers. The demons guarding the castle were startled and ran out. What's happening? What is this? The huge castle had collapsed in an instant. No, to be more precise, it had suddenly crumbled to the ground without a reason. Look over there. The demons who managed to survive this looked at the center, where a huge crater had formed. The demons discovered the existence in the middle of the crater and were all shocked. He's His Majesty. The existence was the Demon King who had disappeared for so long. However, their surprise from seeing him didn't last very long. This was because they felt the huge, encroaching demonic power rising from him and, out of anger, the Demon King screamed. Larisha. He looked like the darkness that burned like a flame. All the demons there were shocked at Chen Yuan's appearance. The motion of raising his hand to transform was unmistakable. Human awakened? Is he from our clan? It was natural that they were confused, but this wasn't the reason the Night King was surprised. His surprise came from Chen Yuan's awakened appearance. Larisha. Chen Yuan was certain about his guesses once he heard the Night King's exclamation. I guess he knew. He showed his awakened form and doubted that the Night King knew of Larisha until Larisha's old name that Kaliaf had spoken of came out. Night King, who called him, hurriedly ran in front and knelt down while bowing his head. Larisha. He was sobbing with a voice filled with an emotion that couldn't be understood. The Night King continued to speak. I, Joseph, always believed that Larisha would be fine. Joseph? Hearing the name, the Grand Duke Kaliaf was surprised. There was no way he couldn't know this name. Someone you know, Your Highness? Grand Duke Kaliaf nodded his head at Duke Bevman's question. I know him. Arisha's closest confidant. He was one of the two dukes who had supported the former demon king, Arisha. He knew that when Arisha disappeared, he had disappeared too, but didn't think that he would be in Bamut. Why is he in here? He was curious about it. Shoo. Chen Yuan covered his face with his palm. Turning back to normal, Chen Yuan looked at the Night King, who was still full of emotion. Hm. Chen Yuan looked down and smiled. Do you know me? At those words, Grand Duke Kaliaf turned pale. He thought that Chen Yuan was going to say that he wasn't Larisha, but that didn't happen. Instead, the Night King raised his face in shock. El Larisha. Do you not know me? I don't remember. You don't remember? The Night King was visibly confused at the answer, and looked at Chen Yuan with a blank expression. After a moment, he seemed fine. Ah, now I know why Larisha didn't return. The Night King was convinced that Chen Yuan was Larisha, but had just lost his memory. Out of pure luck, he had entirely misunderstood the situation. At that, Grand Duke Kaliaf bit his lip. Huh. He didn't think that Chen Yuan would deceive the Night King. No, Duke Joseph, this way. He thought that Chen Yuan would try to suppress the former Duke by force, but this was better. Whisper. Due to the rapidly changing situation, the demons around noticed something was off, prompting Duke Joseph to tell the demons. What are you doing? Larisha, no, Arisha, has come. Bow. Arisha? He is Arisha? At his shout, the demons were shocked. Arisha was a legend in their clan. Is this true? The demons hesitated despite Duke Joseph's orders, but it didn't last long. The demons who noticed the difference in power bowed to Chen Yuan. Regardless of his being Arisha or not, their leader bowed, so they too had to bow. Damn it. There was someone looking at the situation with displeased eyes. That was the demon who was holding the head of Marquis Irene, who said with a sneer, Forget about your other arm. Flustered, the demon unclasped the hand on her head and said, I didn't say that yet. He was an unbelievable coward. Inside the hut in Bamut, Chen Yuan was sitting in a chair as Duke Joseph was kneeling. Curiously, Duke Joseph asked, You really don't remember anything, Your Majesty? At that, Chen Yuan nodded his head without changing his expression. Duke Joseph, who believed that, grunted his teeth. It all happened because of that bastard Torah who coveted the throne. If I had noticed his ambition a little sooner, Your Majesty wouldn't have gone to the trivial planet known as Earth. Torah? Earth? Chen Yuan and Kaliaf had a questioning look on their faces, and both had their own doubts. The reason Kaliaf was interested in Torah was because that was the name of the current demon king. Chapter 206. Larisha. Part 3. The Grand Duke asked with a puzzled face. Demon King, no, this is because of Torah. What does that mean? Hearing the Grand Duke's question, Duke Joseph looked at him. It seemed like he still disliked Kaliaf. Kaliaf, I have nothing to say to you. However, unlike before, he seemed fine with his presence. Grand Duke Kaliaf shook his head. Duke Joseph. Even if I said I didn't know you, It is a little too much if you consider our friendship in the past." Upon hearing that, Duke Joseph answered in an angry voice. "Even if Larisha is now like this, do you believe I will speak to someone who acknowledged Torah as the king?" Sigh. The Grand Duke sighed. It was then that he realized why Duke Joseph hated him. Duke Joseph was a loyal follower of the former demon king. "We were at war at that time." Grand Duke Kaliaf tried to explain his stand, but Duke Joseph raised his voice. "Then, after the war, why wasn't Torah punished for breaking the law?" "Duke Joseph, listen to what I have to say." "I don't want to hear it." In the end, even Kaliaf couldn't stand it and also replied in a loud voice. "Then, as you said, without recovering from the effects of the Third War, should we have waged an internal war with the man who took the place of the Demon King?" Grand Duke Kaliaf yelled out his reason. The internal war couldn't be waged unless the clan was safe. However, Duke Joseph had a different idea. Justification. Reason. In this matter, when can you even catch that rebel traitor if you keep looking for such justifications? Enough. Chun Yoan, who had been silent, intervened. Duke Joseph kept his mouth shut at the daunting voice. Then Chun Yoan commanded him. "Tell me in detail about everything you know." "What do you mean?" "Larisha, no, tell me how I disappeared." Chun Yoan wondered why Larisha had to go to Earth. Duke Joseph began to recall it. "I don't remember exactly how many years had passed since I spent a lot of my time here. However, I do remember that it was during the Third War. Two clans were fighting for power on this planet, the Larisha and Talisha. They had led their clans to war for many years. Unlike the First and Second Wars, it was a time when everyone was getting tired as the war lasted long. And Larisha told me." "About?" Duke Joseph spoke with trembling eyes. "He told me that it was pointless to wage war on this wasteland and said it would be better to find fertile land elsewhere." The Grand Duke nodded his head. It was known that they went through a long First and Second War for thousands of years, turning the sky red and the planet dry. The shining civilization no longer existed. That is so like Larisha. Grand Duke Kaliaf, who accompanied him, couldn't hide the bitterness. He was indeed the best king he ever served. So? Even during the war, Larisha would use the gate from time to time and inspect other planets. So it was decided to move. Duke Joseph nodded his head at those words, and Grand Duke Kaliaf was puzzled by this unknown fact. Why? He was the one who never heard Larisha mention it. As if noticing it, Duke Joseph said. It was a situation where the frontline commander would be summoned after the plan had been finalized. Then who else knew? Who do you think? At that time, there were 5 Grand Dukes. Among them, Kaliaf and Torah were thought to be the next kings. Torah. Larisha was looking for a suitable planet with our 2 dukes and Torah, and that was Earth? You are correct. The creatures living on the planet had low strength, and there are few things that could be dangerous to us. From the viewpoint of the demon, the Earth was weak. Even if a lower-level demon came, they could wipe many of them. Although he agreed to it, Chun Yowan's expression changed as humans were being mentioned this badly. Duke Joseph was unaware of this and continued telling the story. Until then, that Torah bastard was also positive about moving to another planet. What was the problem? There must have been some reason. Duke Joseph grunted his teeth in anger. I didn't realize at that time that he might be greedy for the throne. Greed. Please punish me for my incompetence. Duke Joseph banged his head on the floor as he sincerely asked for punishment. Dismissing it, Chun Yowan commanded him. Continue. Specifically, around the time the migration was readied, Torah suddenly took a stance against it. The 2 dukes at that time couldn't understand the reason for it. As a result, the planned and prepared migration was halted. Since it was in the middle of a long war, Larisha also didn't want to lose power, so Tora wasn't opposed. Why did Tora reject it? It must be because he was greedy for the throne. Duke Joseph was sure that it was because of ambition. At that, Chen Yuan spoke in disappointment. So you don't know? You don't know the reason why he was against it? At that, Joseph shut his mouth. As Chen Yuan stated, he didn't know the exact reason. There was only one reason he could guess. Speak. During a discussion, Tora rejected it at one point. And? Larisha frequently visited Earth to check it, and one day at a meeting, we were briefed about cooperating with humans. Cooperating with humans, yes. From what he heard, they were supposedly migrating to Earth and colonizing it. However, cooperation was unexpected for Chen Yuan. Larisha often said that humans on Earth are savage but rapidly developing, so working with them will help the clan. However, most of the demons' attitudes shifted after that. What about it? What kind of cooperation would we need with livestock, was what Tora said. Chen Yuan's eyes narrowed at those words. The current demon king, Tora, treated humans as livestock. From the perspective of humanity, it is incredibly unpleasant. But why did Larisha insist on cooperating with humans? This was strange too. Larisha was in the same position as other demons. Whatever happened, something changed Larisha's intentions. So, he started the rebellion because of that? Probably. It didn't take long for him to move. The migration to Earth was postponed, but the war was still happening. Small and large-scale wars were being fought each time, and Larisha, the Grand Dukes, and the Dukes would step in depending on the situation. Duke Joseph suddenly spoke to Kaliaf. Duke Kaliaf, do you remember that day? That day? The day Talisha came to attack from the north. That day. Grand Duke Kaliaf's face turned heavy. Chen Yuan asked. What do you mean? In the Third War, 5 wars were happening in different locations when Talisha suddenly came from the north. The head of the clan is needed to be in the battle. However, it was rare for Larisha or Talisha to bump heads directly, since if the leader falls, so does the clan. When the northern front collapsed, we received a message saying that Talisha had stepped up, and Larisha and the 2 dukes went there. It was a clash of the leaders of the clans. It was a battle that could determine the victory at once. Thanks to that, more than 40% of the clan's power was sent there. Did you win? Larisha and Talisha fought for 3 days and nights. That was a long time. Hearing this, Talisha seemed like a strange one too. And the result? Larisha induced a strong wound on the other. Nice. But Larisha had consumed too much of the power and suffered serious injuries, so Larisha had to return to the castle from the front line. Chen Yuan thought. Both sides gained nothing but injuries. Rather than winning, they were both injured. Perhaps the other side was also happy that Larisha was injured. That would help boost their clan's morale. Our clan couldn't miss the chance where Talisha was wounded, so we led the army and marched north. And Larisha was sent to the castle? Thud. Duke Joseph banged his head again. It was disloyalty of mine. No matter how many people were there, I should have stayed back with Larisha. In the end, that was what happened. And Chen Yuan asked Grand Duke Kaliaf. What were you doing then? Blocking the southwest front. Talisha was able to cross the northern front because of the sudden attack. As the large army suddenly rushed south, the Grand Dukes went there. I see. He could guess what had happened. In the end, the seriously injured Larisha was left in the castle. Tora targeted Larisha that time. Yes. Neither Kaliaf nor I could see that man in charge of the Eastern Front. Duke Joseph banged his head in guilt. He truly regretted it. If he had stayed back, maybe the situation would have been different. Shoo! Chen Yuan stopped him from hitting his head with internal energy. He understood the situation, but he couldn't punish him since he wasn't Larisha. The story isn't done yet. Black smoke came from the forehead of Duke Joseph, and he continued. When we came to the castle, it was all done. There was a message sent to the dukes at the northern front. A statement that said Larisha acknowledged Tora was the Demon King. Duke Joseph couldn't believe it and escaped from the front line and ran to the castle. I didn't believe him, so I questioned him. The current Demon King, Tora, insisted it happened according to law. But Duke Joseph couldn't deal with Tora, who was now the Demon King and had Larisha's armor. So what happened? I investigated the clan which remained in the castle that day to know the truth. It must have been dangerous. It was the Demon King's castle, so Duke Joseph took the risk to uncover it. Tora didn't fully embody the power of the Demon King, so there were no other better chances than it. Duke Joseph took advantage of it. After several days of investigation, he found an informant. The person who was a member of the Demon King's escort, and even though he wasn't on duty that day, he happened to listen to the voice of the Demon King and Tora. What was it? Tora said this. If the earth is that good, then rot on earth for the rest of your life. That was what the escort heard. After that, he said he witnessed the current Demon King coming out and slaughtering the others in the castle. Luckily, he survived as he fled from the castle and hid in fear. I asked him to testify, and I tried to bring down the current Demon King. The current Demon King broke the law and rebelled. To execute him, Duke Joseph contacted the high-ranking demons on the front lines and gathered forces. However, I took him too lightly. Naturally, Tora's aides were watching him. It is said that Duke Joseph, who was caught before even contacting them, was imprisoned under the Demon King castle. He didn't kill you. He was trying to convince me. A war was going on, but the Demon King was replaced. As a result, the power was weakened. In such a situation, Tora couldn't hastily kill strong people. If he were killed, the people who were Larisha's aides would also resist, and new problems would arise. While I was imprisoned, I tried to gain more demonic power. Unlike the first, because of the war, his surveillance was neglected. Duke Joseph didn't miss the chance and escaped. After escaping, I hid to recover my body fully. It was indeed a coincidence. It didn't take long for him to recover. However, the Third War was finished when he came out, and the clan was on the verge of stabilization. In the meantime, Tora firmly established his position. Duke Joseph couldn't let it go. So he started to spread the word about what he knew to change the public opinion of the Demon King. I thought that at least the loyal ones of Larisha would respond. He looked at Grand Duke Kaliaf as if asking why he didn't respond. Chen Yuan knew one thing from this. Kaliaf. The truth behind the rumors you spoke is here. Grand Duke Kaliaf thought and said. It was you. The one who made the rumor. What do you mean? I was doing inquiries to find someone who knew the truth. Inquiries? Duke Joseph thought Kaliaf had bowed to the current Demon King. Duke Joseph couldn't understand it. In the end, they were at odds with each other. How can this? If only they had met, the present situation would have been different. Considering the power of the Demon King, it was a low chance now. Then Chen Yuan asked Duke Joseph. You were captured by Tora and imprisoned here? No. No? I thought the only place I could hide was Bamut. Bamut is known to be the worst prison. Who would think of running here? Duke Joseph decided that the pursuit would stop then, so he came here. I wanted to survive, by gathering strength of the prisoners, somehow punishing those who rebelled against my Larisha. With a feeling of holding on to something, he chose the lesser evil. when caught, the result would be death either way. Duke Joseph. Kaliev felt deeply moved by his loyalty. He never dreamed someone sacrificed their lives so much for Larisha. Kaliev felt pathetic for the way he moved till now. "You are the true loyalist of Larisha," Duke Joseph said in a voice that said that the sincerity was understood. "I did doubt the Grand Duke's loyalty." The hostility disappeared, and so did the misunderstandings. Duke Joseph looked at Chen Yuan and said, "Still, seeing Larisha like this, all this is a penance for." Whisper. A commotion could be heard from outside. Not long after, the one-eyed demon under Duke Joseph brought someone in. Marquis Russo? It was a demon under Grand Duke Kaliev. Unable to adapt to the conditions here, he struggled to move. "What is it?" "Why, Your Highness, we have a problem." "Problem?" The fact that he, who was guarding outside, had to come into the prison meant something terrible had happened. Then Marquis Russo answered. "The long-disappearing Demon King has reappeared." "What?" Grand Duke couldn't hide his shock. He was sure that the Demon King suffered a loss of life, but for him to suddenly appear in public after 2,000 years. But that wasn't the problem. Right now, he is heading towards the gate. Gate? The Grand Duke was puzzled. He disappeared till now and suddenly heads to the gate. He couldn't understand the reason behind it. Why? It is strange. According to the informant, the Demon King said he would head to Earth right away. Chen Yuan got up from his seat. "What did you just say?" Head to Earth, head to. It's probably to destroy and conquer it." Huh. Chen Yuan's eyes turned cold.